My name is Barbara Newman. If you were in one of my other sessions, you would have seen this puzzle piece already. Green and pink. I think that when God knit us together, He used green and pink yarn. Green for those gift areas, those strengths, things that we're good at. Pink for the hot spots, those things that are a little bit more difficult for us. And I've gotten to know lots of children, lots of adults over the years. And would you agree with me that each one of us is a combination of green and pink? Would you agree? Yeah. So no matter who we're looking at, God's design in us is not to make us all green people. We have those areas that are challenges, things that are difficult for us. And I think it's important for us to remember that as we look at some individuals who may have some behavior concerns, children that challenge us in ways that maybe we don't quite understand, it's important for us to put that in perspective. You see, because that's not just an out-of-control kiddo. It's not a kiddo who's, maybe has some issues with ADHD or autism or whatever emotional issues. It is a child who has been formed in God's image, who has been made with gifts and areas of challenge to fill an important role in the kingdom. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love puzzle pieces, because they fit together. And we in the body of Christ fit together like a puzzle, right? So that areas where I'm strong, I can help someone else. Areas where they're strong, they can help me. I want to challenge you to remember, especially when we're dealing with some tough situations with behavior, a lot of times it's easy to just see pink in a child. Would you agree? It's like an overwhelmingly pink child. And I want to encourage you and have colleagues with you that can encourage you to say, no, I'm going to put on God's glasses right now. Who I am looking at is a gift to this community, who is there to bring a gift to us, a person who has been sent to make us more complete, who has been arranged. 1 Corinthians 12:18, but in fact God has arranged the parts in the body, each one of them just as He wanted them to be. This child's been arranged with us, and this child has gifts to also bring to the community. Dearly loved child, important, honored member of the body of Christ. Right? Can we agree on that place? Because I think that's really important to put all of the challenges that some children can bring to us in perspective of who is that person. And some days you're going to have to put on a mighty good pair of glasses to see that, and I understand. I understand. But how important for us to frame children in a puzzle piece way. I'm going to bring that up a little later, so I wanted, though, to introduce that now. I also wanted to make note of a few important things. Behavior, it's communication, right? Babies communicate. They don't have words. How do they do it? You all know when a baby is upset, right? There you go. Don't need any words to communicate. I need something right now. Those two couples certainly are communicating different things, aren't they? Our body language, what we do is communication. And I think sometimes we forget that when children have some behavior concerns, they're communicating something to us. I'm uncomfortable. I've got a sensory problem going on here and everything is too loud. I've just had a really rough morning at home. Do you know what's going on at my house? And it comes out not as words, but it comes out as behavior. So one of the things I think is important, and whether you have to buy one of these hats, I actually was helping at a church and I bought them all those Sherlock Holmes hats. I said, look, put this in perspective. This child is not out to get you. They did not wake up in the morning and say, I'm really going to go after this person. That was not what they're up to. They're communicating something. So get the facts, observe, try to figure it out, put the pieces together, and use that detective mind to think, what is that child communicating? What can I learn from the way that child is behaving so that I can better interpret the loud voice, the anger, the whatever that behavior may look like? Okay, Sherlock Holmes, distance yourself a little bit. It's not, in general, and I've observed a lot of kids with unique behavior issues, it is typically not an attack against that person. It is a way to communicate something. Sometimes a very desperate cry to be recognized, to get some help and support, and there just are not the words to be able to describe what that child needs to say. Okay? So detective work. Behavior is communication. What are they communicating? I'm going to do my best to observe the clues. Where do you start? Oh, you got a really tough situation. Maybe it's that third grade Sunday school class that you've always employed 2 extra volunteers all through the grades. You just know you need those extra pairs of hands. It could be that 3-year-old that you're looking at going, wow, you know, I've taught a lot of 3-year-olds and this one just has some unique qualities. And what could that be? I think it's so important that you get to know that individual, that is the place that you begin, right? We need to use that detective work, but let's discover who is that child. Sometimes by asking parents as they enroll children in Sunday school or youth group or whatever it may be, just by asking the question, does your child have any special needs you'd like us to be aware of? Many times they'll disclose some information and you can follow up on that. Basically, getting to know the child to me is as easy as a puzzle piece, right? And so if you have a child, and we're not necessarily saying, does your child have an IEP or a special education label? That's not what you need to know, right? So I usually suggest that your conversation goes something like this. Hello, how are you?
Good.
So glad that your child's part of the group. And I really want this year to be successful for Nathan. You know, I wondered if you could tell me just a little bit of information, so this will be a good year. What does he love to do? Where did I start? The green, right? That green part, his strengths. Because I don't want this mom, who's probably been dealing with these behavior issues at home for quite some time, to get the impression that that's all I see. I want you to know very clearly that I am using what I call God's eyes to look at your child, that I see those gifts too. So tell me about the green. And then, you know, are there any things that are difficult for your son, right? That's a great conversation to have. Sometimes, if you're not even quite sure how to bring that up with a parent, sometimes a great way to do is go with the words, I noticed. Hey, you know what? Tony, I'm so glad. Now you have a son. Did you know that, Tony? There we go. It's so great to work with your son. I absolutely love it. And you know what? I was noticing how much energy your son has. He's just amazing. Creative mind. He goes to the Legos all the time, right? What am I noticing? Right? The cool, way cool things about Tony's kid. But what's difficult, you know, and say, but I noticed the one thing. But I noticed, you know, when we're all sitting down, that's really tough for your son. Have you noticed that? Okay? Pick the one thing embedded in that green part. I noticed, you know, all this cool stuff. Pick the one hot spot that you want to bring up at that time and then say, have you noticed that too? So, you know, I think that that's a really nice, less defensive way to ask a parent about some of the questions that you may have, because truthfully, you want to get to know that child so that you can make this a successful place. One of the tools that CLC Network has, and you have some of that information, you can go online and check those things out, for churches in particular, is something we call a glue manual. And so as you're getting to know children, there are some forms and things in there that you can use to help better understand who is that individual and how can we put together something helpful. So let me just talk, first of all, about some kids with some significant behavior issues. Then we're going to move into some kids that just might be part of your Sunday school class that don't necessarily have some kind of a special education designation, but just have some challenging behavior areas, okay? But I always say, if you've got somebody who maybe has an emotional impairment or has an autism spectrum disorder or is a child who has maybe some other reasons for having some difficult areas of behavior, don't recreate the wheel. If there's already a behavior plan that somebody has designed, some really smart person who does that for a living and has constructed a behavior plan, it is much better to learn what that behavior plan is and try to implement that in your church setting. Okay? So don't recreate the wheel. If it already exists, it's way better for kids to be consistent. So if you're doing it at school and home and at church, it will make much more sense to that child. So you might have to ask, could I have permission to visit your child's school? Sometimes you can get it, sometimes you can't for confidentiality reasons, but perhaps that parent would agree and the school would also agree that you could come in and just kind of visit an environment where that plan is in action so that you can see how the other staff manages that particular child and how that plan works. Maybe it works great at home. Ask if you could show up, and don't tell them that you're there to observe this child. Say, please invite me over as your friend for a cup of coffee so I can watch how this works at home. So you're not a threat, you're not a person with whom they're going to put on a show, but you're just part of the environment. So maybe you go to a school, maybe you go to home, who knows where that will be. Maybe it's a daycare setting where a plan is already working very well. Then you need some volunteers, perhaps, some people, your teachers, maybe you need some extra support in that room, and really spend some time, especially with some tricky behavior issues, to train those people well. Make sure you look every one of them in the face and say, are you comfortable with this plan? And you need every single one that's on that team to say yes before you move on and put it in place, okay? Because I think so often we say, we need a buddy, somebody volunteer, and then we just put the buddy in the room, and it's like, that's supposed to fix the whole problem. But a lot of times I think the buddies have felt like, please give us some training, give us some information. So train those people who are going to be working with this child, train them well. Another idea for some really unique and difficult situations could be this. Invite an effective person, somebody who's really good at hanging out with this particular child. Invite them to come to your church setting for a couple of weeks. Some churches have done this very successfully. In fact, it's great for the child if they're used to interacting with a particular adult in a great way. We've had some school assistants that have come. The church has said, hey, we'll give you, $25 if you'll come hang out here for a morning or whatever. I think it's fair to offer to pay them for their time. And so invite them in and have them work with that child, and then let the volunteers watch. Great bridge for that child to have this safe, secure, effective adult be the one sitting next to him, right? And helping him manage life in a church setting. It's a great transition tool to be able to use. So again, I think, think about those things. A lot of times, that to me is the very best plan you can do. Find what's already working, translate it to church, observe it working well, get somebody in who knows what they're doing, and let your volunteers watch, right? Really neat story about that. We had a church, there was a child with autism and had some unique behavior issues, and they had a great behavior plan. There was a school assistant who was so effective in working with him. The church said, hey, we want this to work. Well, this assistant right there was so excited that the church wanted this to work that they said, awesome. And they said, would you come in? We'll pay you $25 to hang out here for the morning. Just show us how you interact with this young man. So she came. You know what? She'd never been in a church before, but she was so excited that this place was available for this young man that she came for the 2 weeks that they had agreed upon, and then she said, I'd like to come for a couple more weeks, but don't worry about paying me. Pretty soon, this young woman gave her life to Jesus Christ and joined the church. So there we go, because the church had done this way to this child, okay? And so many others had done this. And they saw that, and she saw that and said, that is a community that I want to belong to. So it's a really neat opportunity. And so you never know how God uses those pathways to advance his work in his kingdom. So that, to me, is what I call Plan A. If I could do that with every student who had behavior issues, that would be great. But it doesn't always work that way, right? That behavior plan isn't always there. A child might be at the beginning edges. You might be that 4-year-old teacher who's going, I wonder what's up here. Okay, so again, we have a process going on. So what do you do then? Well, let's think about that. What if you still need ideas for your plan? Now, I'm not much into sports. In fact, if I had to tell you my pink parts, most of them would have to do with hitting, striking, kicking, any sort of ball of any form. But I do like to watch football. And despite what my husband might say, I know a little bit about it. This is what I know about football. I know that there's an offensive side, right? And the offense is the one that's got the ball and you can score the points. You call the plays, they huddle up, they are there, they're advancing down the field, and if they got a shot at scoring, it's because the offense has put the plan together and they're moving down. It appears to me that there's also this defense side, but I think that they are a little more limited in that their best response is to respond to whatever the offense is set up, correct? They're out there, they're not really designing the plan, they're just trying to figure out what they're doing and blocking the shots and trying to prevent them from moving down the field. Well, for whatever reason, this reminded me of behavior management, all right, in classrooms. In some ways, there are certain strategies that I call being on the offense. They're offensive side strategies. We've got the ball as the leaders. We're making the plan. We can score the points. And let me tell you, you are far more effective on offense than you are on defense, because when defense happens with behavior management, that's when I think we're responding to what that child has just done. Okay? And we're far more limited when we put ourselves in that area, correct, than if we've got the ball and we've got the plan and we're running with it. So I want to give you two sets of strategies, but I'm going to spend a lot more time on offensive strategies than I am on defensive strategies, because I think many times if you are on offense, you will be able to be far more effective with some children with challenges than if you only have a defensive plan. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's where we are. And here's the good news. Behavior really isn't all that complicated. You really only have three things that you can manipulate. You can manipulate the child. We could ask the child to change, right? Maybe the child could take some medication. Maybe the child could have a behavior plan and really do some maturing. But we want the child to do some changing. We could employ others, and we could change the others. Maybe it's changing expectations of others. It could be adding other people. Let's put some buddies in here. You know, you can change the others. Or the third choice is to change the environment. You can move the chairs around, the tables around. You can undecorate. You can decorate. You can, you know, manipulate the environment. That's about all we got to work with, all right? So those three arenas are things that you can actively work with in order to implement some change. Let's talk about some offensive strategies for a couple of minutes. And then I'm going to pause when I'm done with this list. So as you look down that list of offensive strategies, think about what might work with one of the people that brought you to this room. Usually people come to a sectional like this because you've got somebody in mind, somebody who is a treasure to you, somebody who's a puzzle to you, somebody you really want to go back to church with tomorrow and say, guess what? I got something good for you today, okay? So think about that. This list, what might work? Because I'm going to take a break pretty soon and see if you found that aha that could make a difference, okay? So here we go, offensive strategies. Number one, I was children's ministry director for 14 years in my own church. And let me tell you, the one thing I would say to people, be prepared, right? Please do not show up and have to spend the first 5 minutes with kids running around trying to figure out what page you're on or gather up your supplies. You have just lost the battle right there. What are they stepping into? Make sure when they come to see you, they're stepping into what you want them to do. You're prepared, you are ready to go. And even if you forgot a supply, fake it, okay? Send somebody else off to get it, but be ready to go. Not just with supplies and the material and knowing the story or having the youth group plan for that day, whatever it may be, but I think we have to be prepared in knowing who is coming to visit us as much as we can. What do you know about that child? Have you met that child before? Have they had a chance to come and see the place? Have they had a chance to touch the cool things in the room before you're going to ask them to come and sit down on the floor? Have they had a chance to see your picture somewhere? Have you sent them a card in the mail? Have you given them a chance to build a little bit of time knowing what to expect when they come to see you that first time? What do you know? Yeah, you'll have visitors, but what information can you catch about them right when they come in? Do you have a system in place where their parents are filling out some information before they're admitted to your area? I hope so. Can you look at that before you actually are interacting with that child? How quickly do you get that information? I know that was something, we had this great process set up when I was children's ministry director. We'd have them fill out copious things, and 2 weeks later, the actual volunteers who were working with the kids would get a copy of that. It's like, wait a minute, that's way too late. We need to somehow get important information out to people. They have some incredible systems nowadays with computers and things parents log in, and it flashes these red things or prints name badges out a different way. So you know, man, I got to find out something here about Lisa because her name badge is printed black on white instead of white on black, or whatever the system could be. But make sure you can be prepared just knowing who is going to come and see you. All right? Makes sense? I think that's a huge one right there. Think about the physical environment. Wow, okay, this would be a challenge if we had this many people, like teenagers, this many in one room this size. Wow, that could be a challenge. But, sometimes it's just a matter of thinking about space and how we can divide it up. So don't ignore that one. I was in one place and it was beautifully done. They had a setting over here where the younger children could sit on the floor. They had a table over there that they did activities, and they had another one in that corner of the room, and the door was right there. And it was kind of this free area in the middle, right, where the children could do some movement or whatever it was. But they had a runner. Anybody have a runner? That would be the child that takes off to the door and tries to find their parents several times during the time that they are at church. Every corner that they were in had free access to that door, and that child could make it to that door faster than any adult in the room, okay? So I said to them, why don't we think about the environment? Is there a way we could move the room around so that that door is not so very accessible? So they moved some tables and actually stationed kind of the person that was staffing this craft area right by the door at a table, kind of sitting in front of it. You know what? That fixed the problem. We didn't have to come up with a huge behavior plan. We had to manipulate the physical environment. So think about that. Are you always putting certain things up and away? Are you always having to move things on the spot? Think about that. If we just moved certain things up higher, if we just had a corner that was this way, would it be helpful to a child? Okay? Next one. I like this. Remember when I was telling you about those puzzle pieces? I used the word I notice. I think that is a powerful way to interact with kids too, to notice things about them. You know, I noticed. It could be clothing. I noticed you often wear blue jeans, right? I notice you often have ribbons in your hair. I notice you are very careful about watching after your sister. I noticed you always smile when we're singing. I noticed. And you can do that with all of the kids, but it's a wonderful way to point out something special. Typically, if a child is doing it frequently, it's important to that child. So to notice some of those cool things that's going on about the child is a great way to build relationship and be able to speak into some of those other I notices later on. I notice that you often have your hands on Tommy when we're, whatever. But notice those things, because if you're only going to notice the hands on Tommy, that child's going to soon tune that out. But notice those special things. And a little bit different than noticing, I think we have to reinforce the positive. But be careful with this one, right? I really like the way Lily is sitting and watching me. Thank you, Lily, right? I had one teacher that decided that every time a child was going to sit nicely, she was going to come and give him a big hug. Would you like that? Oh, you would? I love it. You know what? Thank you. Except she happened to have a child in there who was really defensive about being touched. Guess what? Would that be a positive thing? Would that child repeat that behavior to get that next hug? No, not going to happen. So make sure you pick something that is actually reinforcing to that child. Might be way better if we did one of these. Hey, great job. Love it. Okay, that might be better. And Sylvia here may love a hug. Okay, so get to know. Go back to know that puzzle piece. What is going to be reinforcing to that child? Some kids hate to have positive things spoken about them. They would be much better off with a wink and one of these, okay? Because they don't want you to draw big attention to who they are. So get to know that person. If you use something to reinforce that they don't like, you're not going to get that behavior repeated, all right? Give information. We just kind of assume, I think sometimes, that every kid that walks in the door automatically knows what we expect of them. Or automatically knows when we say, I'd like you to sit nicely, what that is. Well, what is sit nicely? Some kids know. Others might not even know that. Maybe you need a camera so that you can take a picture of Nina, who's sitting so nicely. Can I take your picture? Because I want to show people what sitting nicely looks like. All right. Let's talk about maybe teaching people information about how hard you can and cannot touch somebody next to you. Maybe we have to work on that a little bit. Maybe Renee and I have to work on, hey, you know what? Let's give each other 5. Let's do it really hard, okay? That's like a number 8 giving 5. Let's do a number, let's give each other 5, but just let's do it like a 2, okay? All right? Do you get that? Some kids have no clue how hard they're touching other people. A lot of that is often for sensory reasons, and sometimes you have to teach them that. Or maybe you have to talk a little bit about volume. What is an indoor voice? Or clean. Clean up. What does that mean? Could you take a picture of clean and post that so people can see what clean looks like or what it's supposed to look like when it's done? How could you give them information? What are your expectations? Maybe it's helpful information to say, you know what? I've decided that it's so important that we respect each other, that if I see kids that are, touching each other too hard, I always call their parents after we're done being together. That might be good information for kids to have. Well, you got to do it. But I mean, let them know what your standards are. Do they know? Do they know what you expect when they walk in that door? Okay? One of the ways that you can give information, and some of your faces I've seen several times, and so I've shown this idea called a church welcome story in a couple of other places. So I want to show you the school version. I know some of you work in preschools and other places like that, and I wanted to show you a welcome story. This is a powerful way to give information in a visual way. Our kindergarten teachers at Zeeland Christian School, where I am still a teacher, they send these out in May to all of the kids coming to kindergarten next year. All of the children get a chance to read about kindergarten all through the summer. They know exactly what to call their teacher, where they're going to put their backpack, what to do with their lunch, where to line up. They know all of those things before they ever set foot in kindergarten. It is powerful. So we recommend write these for church, write these for school. I'll show you a little bit of the school welcome story. And again, we have these in our catalogs and things, but these are instruction manuals for good words to use and good words to avoid and things like that. This is what they look like. This is a picture of me, and again, what we often suggest is that parents put that picture of their child in the book. I will be in first grade or whatever. The instructions lead you to a website where you can alter the text and scan in your own pictures. Here's a picture of my school. It's called Countryside Elementary School. This is a calendar. It shows what day I get to start school. I might have times to visit my school before I start, but this will be my first day of school. This is a picture of the door I will usually go in when I come to school. When I arrive at school, I should wait by this door. Do you understand why I use the word usually? I will usually go in when I come to school. Why would I use that word? Right. What if it's pouring rain? What if it's, a situation where they get dropped off at a different area? Do they always have to? So these books have to be accurate, especially if you're working with kids on the autism spectrum, by the way. I'll just throw that in there. If you print out a story like this and it is not accurate, you will have problems. We printed out a story for somebody and didn't put that word usually in there. That child refused to budge until that door was open for that child, even though no one else was lined up there, okay? But that's what they did to get inside. These stories go on to talk about, so you can do these for church, you can do them for school. Just let the kids know what it's going to be like. Sometimes for kids that are anxious about going somewhere, like maybe on an overnight for the first time, it's a camp out or something, you can write a story about that, right? This is the camp. Scan in pictures of where they're going to go. These are great even for middle school, high school kids. Show them what to expect. This is the place where we eat our lunches. This is the place where we sleep. Usually kids get to choose their bunks when we walk in. Sometimes the leader assigns bunks. Whatever you want, but use your usuallys and always. That's what the instructions books will make sure you know how to do. These are great stories and an excellent way to give information. Sometimes kids misbehave because they are incredibly anxious and they don't know what is expected of them. This way of giving information is often a great tool. And then I'll just say, teach versus react. A lot of times, again, we're in defense mode when somebody does something, but is there something they're missing? Stop interrupting. Well, does a preschooler know what an interrupt is? Do we need to teach what an interrupt is? Maybe an interrupt is better described as words bumping into mine. Don't let your words bump into mine. Okay? Whatever that might be. What do we have to teach that child so that they can do it differently? In fact, that's often a great strategy. You get everybody coming in screaming, and oh, wait, I forgot to mention to you. In fact, you can take responsibility. This is how we come in. Model it for them. We're going to try it again. All right? This is what I'd like you to do this time. Sorry, I forgot to mention it. and you can teach them how you want them to come in the room or how you want them to do this or that. So remember, that's a strategy too. You don't always have to react that way. Reacting with a teaching setting can be very, very helpful. It can be as much as sitting on the carpet. Maybe it's not going well and say, oh man, I forgot to teach you how to sit on this carpet. Let me show you how we're going to do that. Let's practice doing that. All right, so you're teaching some of those behaviors and how to. That way, you can hold them responsible for it if they don't do it correctly, okay? But you've cleared up any error, any mistake that they might not know how. This is not a real gun, by the way. It's a water gun, in case you wanted to know. But sometimes doing the unexpected is helpful. You know, sometimes it's pulling out that huge pair of sunglasses to capture their attention, or, you know, misting them with a water bottle on a hot day, something that is unexpected. And so if you have a behavior trail that's kind of leading down a negative path, to think of something unexpected to do can be helpful in just rerouting the situation. Develop a relationship. So many churches, and I love the idea of having buddies, I really do, but so many churches do that on a rotation. Would you cover one Sunday a month? Would you give us one Sunday a month? And this child has 4 different individuals with him or her each week at church, and they show up like that's just going to work. Like if I just sit here by Tony, hi Tony, I'm Barb, I'm here to help you pay attention and keep control of your body today, okay? Well, you know what? Why would Tony, sorry you sat in the front row, Tony, are you regretting that about now? I don't know. But, you know, it's one of those things where, why would Tony accept that from me? What would happen if I asked to go over to Tony's house and I got to see some of his cool Lego sets that are very important to Tony, and I sat in his you know, play space and we built something together first, so that when I see Tony, I can say, hey, I sure love that time, or I can show him the photo that I took while I was at his house. This was sure a great day, Tony. I get to hang out with you today. Do you think that would go over better with Tony that day? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've been trained, but I've also spent time investing in building a relationship with Tony so that we can move on to respecting one another. And I think that's far more efficient. So even if you recruit 4 people, that's fine. But make sure they all have a chance to develop that relationship so that that child knows that you're there because you really care about who they are. And you're not just there because somebody made you put your name down on the sheet in the back of the church one day, okay? Set up a system of rewards. Sometimes we forget about that, but making sure, again, that that reward is rewarding to the child. I'm not a huge, super big proponent of food, but we had a mom who was convinced that Oreo cookies would do the trick, and we were kind of out of other ideas. And so we just put a little strip together and had 5 smiley faces with Velcro on the back, and we put them up for different random reasons. Hey, you had a great time, da-da-da. Thanks for listening today. And then we actually had a baggie with 2 Oreo cookies taped to the end of that strip. As soon as she earned 5, she got those Oreo cookies, all right? So it was just a very visual way of we're working towards this goal. Maybe it's stickers that people are earning. Maybe it's tokens. We had one child who really didn't get it, but he loved Chuck E. Cheese. Do you have Chuck E. Cheese here? They have tokens, and so what we did was we went to Chuck E. Cheese and actually got Chuck E. Cheese tokens, and as soon as he earned X amount, he got to take those tokens to Chuck E. Cheese with his parents. So again, sometimes you have to make the system really ring with the child, but try to put those things in place. A system of rewards can be so helpful. Have a sense of humor. You know, sometimes brain researchers will tell you that there is a flood of release when you can just laugh. And sometimes I think we are so serious because somebody told us that we should never smile until Thanksgiving or something like that, right? And really, it's really hilarious what they're doing. And to laugh and then correct the situation can sometimes defuse what's going on way faster than down the list, okay? So remember that. Offer choices. I love choices because it really empowers the child, and I get to keep a lot of control with choices too. You see, if I say to somebody, I need new people to pick on. Amy, have I picked on you yet? I don't know. Amy, you can choose if you want to. I've got this great coloring sheet for you to do, and you can choose if you want to do it by the table or if you want to do it on the floor over by the bean bags. Now, I've given her a lot of choices, right? She gets the power to choose where she's going to do it, but did she get to choose whether she did the paper or not? No, that was my decision. So how to do it, when to do it, why to do it, how much of it to do, a lot of those can be negotiable. But that you're really going to do this, that's my call. All right, so I think choices are great. The people who work with the love and logic system, if you're familiar with that, would often say choices are like deposits in the bank. Every time you let somebody else choose, ka-ching, 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 you're building up this bank account, because there will be a day when they don't get a choice. And you can say, you know, I let you have all these other choices, but today we're going to do this. Many times children are much more excited about doing it that way if they've been allowed to make some choices along the way. You know, I think so often we ignore the fact that most of our children are visual learners. And yet we continue to do so much with words. Have you noticed that? In fact, let's just take a random poll here. How many of you would say, I remember things way better if I can see it? Look around, would you? Okay, put your hands down once. How many of you would say, skip the pictures, I really remember things best if I am told about them? I have my hand up because that is me. I brought pictures and handouts for you today and some visuals because I know I am in the minority. I like to be told, and I listen carefully. I'm one of the few people that would say that that's my preferred mode, is auditory learning. Most individuals now put themselves in the category of visual learning. But how often do we make behavior verbal and auditory? Shh. Okay, well, that was pretty much gone, right? How could we do shh visually? Oh, we could do it this way. How about a traffic light with a clothespin? The clothespin's up on the red, that means no talking. The clothespin's on the yellow, that means we're whispering. And the clothespin's on the green, it's an indoor voice. Does that clothespin ever leave? You're the one that's moving it. You could close your eyes for a little while, but when you open them, that shh is still going to be up there, isn't it? Because it's right up on that talking traffic light. How can we make some things visual that we might not otherwise? This timer, if you've not seen these before, is my absolute favorite timer. We say 5 minutes we're going to pick up. Well, if you're working with younger children or children who just don't have an internal time clock, does that mean anything to that child? These are called time timers, and they actually turn down red. And when the red is gone, time is up. So it is a visual way of marking time. You know, we're going to have playtime for 15 minutes, and it runs on a battery, and you actually can choose it, set it to ding or not ding in the back. So for those kids that get really anxious when you set the timer because of auditory sensitivities, it's taken away. I think too, you know, I talked about some of those visual things, right? Taking pictures of things, carrying that digital camera, taking a picture of clean, so we're not just using words. But think of how you can use those tools to enhance the environment and really make it more clear what it is you are expecting. Think along with a child. Why might they be doing that? What might they be thinking about? Jump into their head and try to figure it out. Are they always having this issue when they're sitting in a certain area? Are they always having this issue during song time? Are they always having this issue, you know, that detective work again? But try to be that child. What would it be like to be that puzzle piece in your setting? You know, whether it's worship or preschool or youth group, whatever that might be, what might it be like to be that child? Sometimes you can get clues about what it is you need to change just by hopping into that child's body and trying to figure it out. Consider sensory issues. How many of you are pretty familiar with sensory integration issues? Is that? Oh, I just have to tell you a mini lesson about this because this will explain so many of your children, I promise you, okay? Our sensory system is an absolute miracle. Most of us are wired right at middle C. Sounds, smells, tastes, we're right in the middle. So we can block out the hum of this projector. You don't hear it anymore until I just mentioned it, right, Sylvia? But you're not listening to that because your brain just blocked that out. It's not an important piece of information for you right now. In other people, you know, they can be very sensitive to noises, to touches. Just a little bit of noise, just a little bit of touch, and it's too much. I got to cover my ears because it might be too loud. Or I might brush past somebody and they say, she hit me, did you see she hit me? And the other kid's going, I just like bumped him. I didn't do anything. very sensitive to smell. You in the back, did you have coffee? Because they can smell things from so far away, just a little bit, and their entire body reacts. Their brain interprets that as a lot, okay? On the other hand, other people can be wired so that they need a ton of sensory information in order to register. Those are those individuals that often talk about like this because they need a ton of sound in order to register. They're not monitoring their own voice, so they speak very, very loudly, right? You have to grab their face to get their attention because you need a ton of sound. It can be in any sensory situation. Touch, right? Little touch. Or you could be a person who craves touch. And when you're coming after somebody, you're going to give them this giant hug, you know, and you're going to try to sit right here because you get to touch both people at the same time. There's got to be space for me. Okay? So you've got these individuals who are just, right, either craving and they're going out. You've got a tiger swing, and you've got some kids because they are balance system. They love to spin. They're daredevils. They're hanging upside down on everything. They're swinging. They're turning. You think they're going to kill themselves because they are just craving all this movement. And then you've got other kids that are dismissed when everybody else is, and they are hanging by the wall because their balance system is so insecure that if somebody bumps them or they get too much movement in sight, they could be knocked off balance. So sensory systems are very unique. Children's sensory systems can be different for a variety of reasons. It's a neurological function. So if you've got a kiddo with autism spectrum disorder, they will have some sort of sensory difference, okay? Anything neurological often means that. One of my children, who's an adult now, has ADHD, okay? That's a neurological difference. He also has a huge tactile thing. He has most of his clothing has holes right here, because he cuts out or pulls out all of the tags. Because if he left it in there, it would drive him absolutely bonkers. He would feel it all day long. Sock line, not putting those shoes on until that sock line is exactly right. Only going to wear certain textures because else it will be too scratchy. Likes to take showers to mellow himself out so that his sensory system calms down, right? Any of those neurological differences can cause a sensory difference, and many times kids' systems mature so that it does improve in time. But I would say it's a huge thing to learn about. If I described for you in those examples any one of the kids, chances are they are dealing with some sensory issues. And let me tell you, churches are a bombardment of sensory issues. Have you ever been in children's singing time before? Let's do it louder, right? Let's make strobe lights and whoa, you know, and you've got these kids that are like, I'm never going back in there again, you know. Their whole system is reeling because we've done it louder and bigger and more boisterous, and they're like, that's not how I'm wired. On the other hand, the kids on this side are going, yeah, give me more, you know, more strobe lights, let me do the flicking, you know, whatever. But again, very individual, very different. So you need to get to know. That's a very good thing to watch out for. I'm going to give you the title of a book. It's not in your handout, so if you want to run it, write it down. It's one of my favorites still, and it's written by a woman named Kranowitz, 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 I think. And it's called The Out of Sync Child. O-U-T, out dash of dash S-Y-N-C, sync child. Barnes & Noble carries them. It's a pretty standard book. If this seems like somebody you know, get some more information about sensory input, because I'll tell you what, so many children. Some children just have sensory issues. Our sensory issues don't come online until about second grade completely, they say. So some younger children just have sensory differences that resolve over time as their bodies mature. Okay? Sometimes it's related to something else, but important to know about. So The Out of Sync Child by Nancy Kranowitz, it would be a great resource for you to look at. I also wrote a book called Autism in Your Church, and in there's a section on sensory issues, and the back ideas to try, many of them relate to making church a better place for those who have sensory differences. Okay, I want to stop just for a minute, maybe two, and I want you to find a buddy. And I want you to talk to that person. Have you found something new that you can try tomorrow or whenever you're going to be with your kiddos? Did you think maybe one of these things, if you tried it, could be helpful for this particular person. Just take 2 minutes. If you're sitting kind of off in a corner, you'll find somebody, find a friend. Don't be shy. Include people that are sitting with you. But talk about that. What might be helpful of this list? Go ahead. Did you find, who here has found something new out of that list that they might be able to try? Did you get some good ideas, a story you could write, information you could give? Good. I really believe that if you can think about what strategies could I use when I've got the ball, when I'm running with it, what can I do to set things up so that it'll be more successful for this individual? I think it can be very helpful. But the truth is, you need a defensive plan too, right? What are we going to do when that child crosses that line? And there are some wonderful systems set up that may or may not work. I still actually sort of love that 1, 2, 3 magic thing for children who struggle with language issues. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking. I'm Nina, that's 1. I can go on, and we know that when I get to that's 3, there's going to be some kind of a consequence, an area for you to sit at, whatever. But I think it's important, again, whatever system you use, for example, that one, I've seen so many people use that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, here's your consequence, and then they'll do things like this. Okay, I already said that's 2. Do you really want me to get to that's 3? What have I just added in there? A 4. And then if I did that, I'm getting really close to saying 3, well, then I just added a 5, right? So be careful. And please don't give kids 3 chances to wail on somebody else. If somebody just hits somebody, that's 3. I think sometimes we use it. That system works so well to me when kids are edging towards that line to try to get them to turn around and go the other direction. Once they've crossed it, then you really need to deal with some kind of a reaction. But, there are lots of informational systems out there, Love and Logic. I just wanted to give you a couple of ideas. Now, like I said, I was children's ministry director for a while. I guess I felt really strongly that the behavior of the one may not interfere with the learning of the whole. When you see that happening, it's just not fair, and you need to do something different. You need another kind of a plan. You need another kind of a system. But that was always my guiding rule. The behavior of the one may not interfere with the learning of the whole. I think also it's best to use, as I said, a behavior plan that's already in place. And it may not be some huge behavior plan put together by a psychologist. It may come from that conversation with parents. What have you found that works well at home? Maybe they have a system that's working. And so, just discover what already might be effective with that child. Remember I mentioned that glue manual, that step-by-step process. One of the supports that can be an outcome of this process is called a glue team. And that's a trained group of volunteers that can really come around this individual. We've used this with some individuals with some pretty major aggressive behaviors. It protects the other kids. It gives you a well-trained army of people who can respond with this individual, who know the plan to follow, and can be part of that individual's life. For example, we had a child who's 13 with autism who had very few words, incredibly creative, loved music, loved to be at church because of the music, loved computers, but because he didn't have many words, when he got angry, he expressed himself with his fists. His bedroom has lots of holes in the plaster because he gets very angry and out of control. So we recruited a group of volunteers from the church to surround him. We called it our football glue team because that's who we recruited. We asked for kind of some athletic guys that were his age or older to volunteer to be part of his glue team. And we trained them, got in some caregivers that were already effective with Ben, and trained them in what to do. But he came to worship. and he moved up and down the ramp along the side. And then when it was time for, he was getting edgy, everybody knew it, his 2 glue team members assigned for that day would say, hey, Ben, let's go. And they had a room set up with all Ben's green stuff, the things he loved to do. And so that was a place that he could go that was very delightful. And in fact, they had creative people at this church that wove the story of salvation into the green things that Ben loved, that wove it into music, that wove it into computers. And there were a lot of neat opportunities for Ben in that place. So consider that. And please remember this. Some kids really are not all that tuned into what you're saying. So make sure you choose your language well. Use words that describe what you want the child to do. Let's say you're only tuned into the last 3 words of this sentence, and I would say to you, now I want you to remember that in this room, I never want you to hit your friend. What did you just hear? I just planted a great idea in your brain, okay? So be careful. What do you want that person to do? Hey, I want to show you a really great way to sit. Let's do this with our hands. We're going to call it listening hands, quiet hands, whatever phrase you want to use, but don't hit your neighbor, okay? Because you're planting that suggestion. So calm bodies, quiet hands, quiet voices. What do you want that person to do? If you use language like that, many times it can be much more successful. But we crossed the line. You can ignore it. Right? Sometimes people do things to get attention. And if you know that, sometimes we've clued in the rest of the people and said, you know what, does anybody else think that sometimes Ben does that because he really wants us to laugh or whatever? I've done it with Ben sitting right there saying, you know what, let's just focus on what's really important right now, and that's the story. So, you know, we're not going to laugh the next time. Sometimes you got to clue kids in. Maybe Ben will be there, maybe he won't, but ignore. Sometimes we have had individuals with seizure disorders where parents have said, I literally can stop the seizure from happening. Many times before a seizure, you get some interesting behaviors. And if they use something loud or a clap, they literally can say, I can stop that seizure from happening. One teacher, I cracked up, I could not believe this, but she said she was having an issue, and she said in a very loud voice, let's pray. And this child folded her hands, bowed her head, and it was done. So again, just interrupting. Might be something loud, might be something, you know, you got to know the kids, but sometimes interrupting the behavior. Often it's followed by redirecting. Did anybody else see a purple dinosaur in here? Hey, let's sing this great new song I learned, right? Again, redirect, get away. We're going to move on to something different. Let me tell you, those look spontaneous, but have a list. Know what you're going to do for a redirect so that it's natural to you, so you're not fishing for it. Learn the bear hunt song, you know, whatever you want to do with the kids so that you know what you're going to do for your redirection time when so-and-so is starting to edge towards that line or has crossed it and you just need to do something a little bit differently. Sometimes you need a break, and so you may need to arrange for that. I really hesitate to use that word timeout, especially in a church setting, but sometimes we all need a break. Many times I can precede that with a choice. Cindy, would you like to stay here and listen to the story, or do you need a break with a hall monitor for a little while? Yeah. So again, I'm going to give her a choice. That's respectful. She can either stay and listen quietly, or she can go have a break with a hall monitor. And sometimes I think that that can be helpful. And I like that word break a little bit better, because some people really do need a break. Life is too stimulating, their sensory system's out of whack, or they've just had it for whatever reason. Sometimes there are natural consequences. Sometimes I have drawn a face, and I will go over here to Emily, and I would say, you know what, Emily, the way you acted today really gave Renee a sad face. And I wonder what you can do to make her face happier. Okay? Let's get a plan. It's her responsibility. She needs to restore the relationship. Maybe she's got to clean something up. Maybe she's got to save up pop can money for 3 weeks until she can do whatever. So another thing that I love from the Love and Logic with younger kids is that word, uh-oh. We're not going to give them 3 chances to do something. It's like, uh-oh. Would you sit over there till you're ready to be a good listener? Would you sit over there till you're ready to be sweet? Will you sit over there till you're ready to be kind? Whatever phrase you want to use. But it's just that simple word, uh-oh, hey, you know, that way. Okay? I think sometimes we use so many words at a time when it's not a good time to use words. Let me offer one final thought. I did not put anything in here. This is the final thought. So this is the one before the final thought. Did not put anything in here about physical intervention, did I? As a church, you have to be so careful before you put your hands on anybody. We have had situations where we have had to design, for the safety of that child or others, some kind of a physical response. But we have permission signed forms. We have well-trained individuals who've been trained by people who are certified by people in the state to do this. Please be very careful about physically intervening with anybody unless you have written permission and you have a trained plan that is written down somewhere so that you are protected. Are there situations? Yes. We have one student who actually calms down when they are held nice and tightly, but we have permission written down somewhere to be able to do that. And anybody doing that holding, their name is on a list of people who have been approved by parents and are trained in that response. Be very careful. Is it helpful sometimes? Yes. Is it necessary with some individuals? Yes. But you get the right permission before you head into that arena. I'm not going to sit here today and show you holding techniques or restraint techniques, because you would need to be fully trained, in my opinion, before you can implement any of that. And there are great systems offered often through school communities that allow you to do that. Or you can work with a parent who can train you. But make sure it's written down exactly what your response is going to be if you're going to do any of that. Final thought. I think it's so important to use that model of Jesus as our very best offense and defensive move. If we think about it, who designed that puzzle piece? Who knows that developing brain? Who knows exactly what happened at that child's home that morning? Who has designed that one? And to be able to go to our Heavenly Father and say, Lord God, we need your wisdom and direction, right? And ask God to be able to show you that next thing to try and do. But I also think sometimes, not in a punitive way, but sometimes I've said, Nina, it's really tough for you today, and I know that God is here with us. Would you like me to pray with you? Okay? I'm not going to pray that God, binds up her hands or anything, but to pray that the Spirit will give her self-control, because ultimately, in Nina's frustrating moves, who do I want her to be able to go to? Right? Right. And so I want to model that, even as part of the behavior plan, who we go to. I hope you got some good ideas to try. Thank you so much for coming. God bless you guys.